I'm Mark Tate, and I'm joined by my good friend and co host, Luther King. Thank you for joining us for today's episode. For the main discussion, we'll both share our thoughts on what fall means to us and what we enjoy the most about the season. But before we jump into the main topic, let's touch on the potential for supply chain interruptions.
That's right, Mark. Recently, Maersk, one of the largest global shipping companies, warned about ongoing labor negotiations between the United States Maritime Alliance, that's USMX, and the International Longshoremen's Association, ILA. These talks are crucial because of the current contract is set to expire in September. Clock's ticking. If
Yeah,
negotiations break down, we could see significant disruptions at U.S. Gulf and East Coast ports.
Exactly, Luther. And while there's no strike clause preventing any job actions before 1 October, right, the possibility of a strike looms large if no agreement is reached. This could cause
Mhm.
some significant problems for all of us, right, because of the backlogs that might take several weeks to recover from. I believe Maersk has assured its customers that they're ready to assist with alternative routes and schedules, but the situation remains tense.
Great point, Mark. And I think the core issue here is all about automation. So
Yeah.
specifically, they're negotiating, really grumbling about auto gate systems at seaports. Which the ILA, again, the longshoremen's argo could cost them jobs because these are you know, blue collar workers doing the work each and every day in the ports. And if they were to bring in an auto gate system, essentially these autonomous systems would begin loading and unloading trucks,
Yeah.
potentially putting these longshoremen out of work. So that's the crux of the issue right now. So the union for the ILA is holding firm,
Hmm.
stating that any new technology should create, not eliminate jobs.
Yeah.
And negotiations recently stalled after the ILA discovered that the Maersk was already using automated systems at some of their other ports, potentially violating the current agreement.
Wow.
So not looking good there. But as you mentioned earlier, retailers are already reacting by
Hmm.
accelerating holiday imports. We talked about that on a previous episode as
Yeah,
well
we
when
did.
we did our mid-year checkup.
That's right.
We highlighted that, hey, retailers know that disruptions could occur. So they've started leaning more and more further ahead, and putting those holiday orders in earlier rather than later.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to keep in mind that even though they put their orders in early,
Hmm.
we're still looking at this very closely. We're watching it very closely because the disruptions can probably continue for the next several months, not only disrupting Christmas, but also the beginning of the year and those things that are so important for automakers as well as they try to ship out their latest vehicles and whatnot to get those out to consumers as well. It's a thin line, I believe, between automation and
Hmm.
looking forward to the next generation of things in our ports and for us the infrastructure and everything that should be done to make the jobs easier and maintaining some of those legacy systems that employ thousands upon thousands of people. And every day we rely heavily upon those people. So we don't want to leave them short without having any work at all and end up in a pretty bad situation as far as their employment. And retailers and shippers, I know they're going to stay vigilant throughout this process and they're going to be prepared for these potential disruptions.
Great points, Mark. And again, we're talking about seaports right now and negotiations on that front. But I also saw another article, within the past day or two, specifically talking about rail,
Oh,
rail
wow.
potential rail strike
Yeah. Oh,
up
man.
in Canada. So again, they're in a similar type situation to where a contract's getting ready to expire. Negotiations, aren't unfolding, as fast as, we would like them to unfold, so there could potentially be some disruptions there. So you take into account disruptions on the seaport. Now we're talking about rail disruptions. It could be catastrophic. It could be
Yes, it is.
catastrophic for the retailer. So as you just reiterated, it's paramount,
Mhm.
that retailers stay vigilant uh, and prepare for any potential disruptions. And again, I know they're all over it, but I thought it was fitting, for Too Low Distance to talk about, some of the things that we kind of see on our news feed, because those are the type of things that we're interested in. So hopefully our listeners will get something out of that. Okay, so now let's shift gears
All right.
to something a little bit more exciting, a little bit more upbeat. Vice talking about supply chain disruptions. Let's talk about fall.
Yeah.
So for me, it's all about football,
Yeah.
but it's also about hunting. So as you know, I'm an avid hunter.
Yes, you are.
Um, and the prep work for a successful hunting season starts long, long, long before opening day.
Hmm.
But really, it just depends on your situation, how much time you have in order to dedicate, to preparing, for your hunting season.
Yeah.
So if you're a guy with a family, spouse and kids, over the years, it was hard to carve out that time
I bet.
um, to start preparing for the season. I'll say too early. I
Hmm.
don't think you can ever start too early, but I tried to narrow, my preparation window down to about 60 days.
Yeah.
Over the years, I've tried to get to this 60-day window.
Hmm.
So for me, archery season starts in October. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. So if my season starts in October, that means I'm prepping in August and September.
Yeah.
So from an archery standpoint, that prep work has already begun. Took the bow, to the shop to get it
Yeah.
kind of tuned up. Make sure it's shooting properly. Make sure all the screws are adjusted. If I need to replace the strings on it, things like that. Just checking your gear to make sure everything's functioning properly. And then I've also had 2 trips to actually shooting range.
Oh, man.
Once I had the work done,
Yeah.
okay, let's take the bow out now. Let's go, put some arrows on some targets and see how it's shooting. Make
Yeah.
any adjustments based upon the work they did at the pro shop, and then just work the muscles out. Because
Yeah.
there's definitely some muscle memory associated with pulling a bow back. So
Hmm.
in my case, it's set at 70 pounds.
Oh, man.
That's the draw weight. So to give me the you know fastest arrow I could possibly get out of my bow. Based upon my arrow weight. Um, and it definitely takes some work to be able to consistently do that on a regular basis as you're shooting
Yeah.
in preparation for the season. Because once the season gets here, you know, unless you take a practice target with you to the woods, you shoot, say, during your lunch break or something, or before you go into the woods. I mean, you could go an extended period without shooting that bow, whereas leading up to the season, you were practicing, maybe weekly, and then you shift it to daily
Yeah.
leading up. So you can get out of practice once the season starts. But the key is to go into the season with your skills honed and prepared, and you're ready, you're capable, you're confident in your equipment, you're confident in your abilities because you've been practicing that. So,
So, and to your point, I remember
hmm
when you were a second lieutenant, I looked over because our houses and base houses were pretty close to each other. Our
yeah,
backyards almost touched. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
looked
they're real
over the
close.
fence and I see you have all these targets in your yard.
Yes,
I'm like,
yes.
what is this guy doing?
What is he doing?
And you were getting ready for season. Even then, we're talking like, wow, that must have been 1998 or something like
Yes, exactly, exactly right. Yeah, so I still do the same thing today. I
that.
do
Uh-huh.
have a target. It's called a block target.
Mm,
That I can go in the backyard and shoot, at least 20 yards.
yeah.
But recently I've been going to an archery range at the MWR,
Oh.
on the local base. They have an annual membership, or
Mm,
you can do like a day pass. So right now I'm just kind of doing the day pass, pay
nice.
to go shoot. They've got an indoor range, got an outdoor range, and then they've got like a walkthrough course too that goes through the woods to where you can shoot. So phenomenal facilities for minimal cost,
Yeah.
and that's kind of what I've been doing in preparation.
Mhm.
So we've kind of talked about archery season a little bit,
Mhm.
my passion from a hunting standpoint, but really what I'd like to do is kind of share some tips, for the listeners. I think it's about 10 tips or 10 things that, as hunters, we should be thinking about as we prepare for hunting season. And I think these tips are applicable whether we're talking about archery hunting, muzzleloader hunting,
Mhm.
or rifle hunting. And I'll just throw shotgun in there depending on your state, and what's considered a legal weapon for you.
Mhm.
So I'm going to start with this first tip, and it's entitled Scout Early and Often. And
Mhm.
essentially what we're talking about here is, you got to put boots on the ground. You got to start scouting, your hunting area well before the season begins. So if you're fortunate enough Have a piece of private property that you have access to. It's significantly easier than, say, if you're hunting on public land, and you've got to drive to that public land. You've got to scout that land. You've got to compete with everyone else that's using that, resource that's available. So there are hikers, there are dog walkers, there are bird watchers, and other folks who are trying to enjoy the outdoors too.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to factor those things in. And definitely from a competition standpoint, once you get into the season, but from a scouting standpoint, in the 21st century now, we all have these smartphones that are
Yeah.
constantly in our faces.
Right.
You'd be amazed at e-scouting, so electronic digital scouting that you can do from the comfort of your home, on your couch, your dining room table, in your car, wherever you are. So I've definitely taken advantage of that recently, being able to digitally map out the hunting properties that I have access to,
Wow.
kind of marking my tree stand locations, marking, deer trails, being able to factor into the wind direction, saying, okay, if I'm going to hunt stand A tomorrow morning, what is the wind going to be doing? So, I mean, it kind of factors all that in for you and it tells you the direction. So, I mean, it's amazing. How
Wow.
far technology has come, with
That's awesome.
regards to hunters. Then, of course, there's a big trend toward trail cameras,
Yeah.
too.
I was going to ask
Um,
you that. Yeah.
yeah. Trail cameras are extremely popular now. They're cellular, so, I mean, as a hunter, if you have a camera set up in your spot in the woods, I mean, you're able to get a picture almost instantaneously or video of a deer that tripped that camera. And most hunters, they're looking for that, that buck, to walk by and trip that camera and potentially give them some insight. But, there's definitely some pros to that, but there's also a downside
Oh,
to cameras too,
really?
because I think it gives you a false sense of
Oh, okay.
what's really happening in the woods because that camera only has a certain field of view.
Yeah.
So just because that deer happened to walk in front of that camera, at a particular time, I mean, who's to say there aren't other deer in the area that's walking behind the camera?
Okay.
Or if you
Yeah.
go for an extended period with no pictures, okay, no deer in the area, but maybe the deer have started taking a different trail that's out of your field of view. So,
I see.
I think the key point there, at least for me, what I've kind of discovered, once I got into cameras, I was all in. I was kind of, enthralled by getting that immediate feedback picture.
Yes.
Oh man, look at this buck. I'm going to jump out there tomorrow morning. I want to try to get on this deer, but again, I think you're still missing bits and pieces, and again, it's what has already occurred. It's a picture of something that has occurred, so it's
Yeah.
almost, you're behind the eight ball to a certain degree.
Gotcha.
To a certain degree. Now, if you've got multiple cameras on a property, then you can start painting a picture, getting an idea of how a particular buck is used in a property. But
I
if
see.
you're just an average hunter, one or two cameras here, I think the key takeaway is don't just put all of your effort into waiting to see what the cameras are doing. If the activity increases on the camera, okay, yeah, more deer walking in front of your camera, but more deer could have been walking behind your camera.
Yes.
And you just missed out on it because you were waiting for an increase in activity before you got in the woods. Vice getting out there and enjoying the woods.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
scout
That's a
early.
great point.
Yeah,
Yeah. I was going
yeah,
to
for
ask
sure.
you, with that, along with
hmm
the, the UAVs or whatever they have, the
Yeah,
smaller ones,
drones.
the
Yeah,
drones.
little
Yeah.
drone.
Drones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you incorporated those? I say
No,
UAVs. I don't know what's going on with me, man, but
that's
yeah,
the military in us.
that's it. That's
That's
right.
that military. No, I have not incorporated drones. And again, I think, the industry, I'll say the
hmm
industry, the, state regulations vary from state to state,
Yeah, they do.
whether or
Yeah.
not you can use them for certain things,
hmm
definitely from a scouting standpoint, so obviously I don't think anyone's supportive of using technology to give hunters, too many advantages over that game animal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being able to have an overhead drone giving you real time feedback,
Yeah.
that kind of pushes the envelope,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And I was going to ask then, where's the sport in all of it, right? Where you can,
Exactly right.
yeah. Yeah.
exactly right, exactly right. But you know, I can see positive benefits of using it to recover a
Yeah.
deer that you've, you know, shot, attempted to harvest, but you're having a hard time
That makes sense.
recovering the animal. So if you know had a drone that had some sort of, you know, heat signature camera, I can see
Mhm.
that being potentially beneficial. It helps you with that game recovery piece,
Makes
you know,
sense. Yeah.
or you know, scouting a property before the season starts. But once the season starts, yeah, I'm just not a big fan of it. And
Yeah.
again, I know each state, you know, they're thinking through how they want to incorporate them or not incorporate them, and really the same for the trail cameras too. You know, some states that initially allowed trail cameras have started to reverse
Oh,
some of those earlier decisions and saying, hey, they're no longer authorized, no longer legal in this state, or no longer legal on like a public hunting area.
wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
can
so
see that.
and probably about halfway through last year, you know,
Mm.
I kind of came to that realization that hey, I thought I was spending too much focus and time on paying attention to what these cameras were, you know, giving me, and
Mm.
you know, at one point I just kind of unplugged them all,
Oh,
and I just said, hey, let me
yeah.
get back to the basics. Let me do what I know how to do, how I learned how to hunt. Let's boots on the ground. Let's get out there. Let's walk this turf. Let's figure out what the deer are doing, you
Yeah.
know, and put a plan together. And just not be so reliant upon that technology. So, actually, you know, got a little bit more enjoyment out of the season. Kind of once I did that,
Uh-huh.
because I just found myself getting too kind of tied to it, and that leads me to that second tip. I know I'm kind of I'm going a little long.
No, it's
You know, I
good.
can talk about
Great.
this stuff forever, as you know.
Great. I
But that
love it.
next tip is all about checking your gear.
Yeah.
You know, we did touch on this a little bit earlier with regards to your archery equipment, you know, but the same goes for your rifle, you know, your muzzleloader. Make sure your stuff is functioning properly. So we
Mhm.
should be going to the range as well to make sure they're still sighted in,
Mhm.
make sure they're functioning properly. Depending on how you hunt, you know, if you hunt elevated off the ground in a tree stand, you should absolutely be checking your tree stands to make sure they are functioning properly.
Yeah.
They're still securely mounted to the tree if it's a stand that you leave up. You know, if you've gotten into saddle hunting, which is it's a mobile
Oh,
form of hunting to where you essentially wear a saddle, if you will, you know, a web type strap that kind of goes around your waist.
okay.
Um,
Wow. And
and
you're
you're
hanging from a tree?
hanging from the tree.
Man.
You're
Oh,
yeah,
woo.
with a series of ropes. So
Oh,
you have a
wow.
tether that kind of goes around that's connected to your waist, and then it's connected to the tree, and then you can
Okay.
adjust your distance to and from the tree. But that's
Okay.
how you're connected. And then it has, you know, a series of knots that are tied into the rope to prevent it from slipping,
Gotcha.
you know, in
Yeah.
the event of a fall. And then the platform that you're standing on, they're significantly smaller than the platform that's on a fixed tree stand.
Ah, okay.
Uh, so I think the big benefit to saddle hunting is that it just gives you that mobility,
Yeah.
you know, the ability to be able to climb down if you've got a set of lightweight mobile climbing steps.
Mhm.
You pair that with a lightweight platform that's just big enough for your boots to go on, and
Yeah.
then with your saddle, and then you're down to, you know, probably 6, 9 pounds, 10 pounds total at the most,
Mm.
you know. And I mean, that's something you can easily just kind of throw on your back on a backpack and
Oh, yeah.
get back in there,
Yeah.
find a spot, get up in your tree, hunt, and get back down, and you can do that continuously on a repetitive basis, day in and day out, or throughout the day
Yeah.
if you needed to.
Yeah.
Um, so, so it's definitely a growing trend.
It's good to know. And
Um,
also, to your point about that, the weight, I mean, that's one of the things you look at as well,
yes,
right? How much
yes,
weight are you taking in with you when you talk about checking your gear? That's not just your shooting, it's like the
yes.
other stuff you have, right?
Everything that you have
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Everything else that you have as well. You
Okay.
know, so in your backpack, you know, obviously, you know, most hunters, you should have a first aid kit of some sort in your backpack. You know, typically you're taking a snack of some sort, power bar, granola bar,
Yeah.
apple, whatever. Definitely should have some water, and once the temperatures, kind of drop, hunters typically have coffee or,
Yeah.
hot chocolate or something else, extra pair of socks, get wet, hand warmers. I mean, so and then you got your binoculars,
Oh man, it's a
you
lot of
got
weight.
your knives, series of
Yeah.
knives,
Wow.
your licenses.
And so,
Um,
do you have a GPS phone? I think they sell those in some of the major retailers.
yeah, so I don't have a separate. I don't carry.
Mm-hmm.
I have a GPS, device, Garmin GPS portable device that I used, when I was up in Alaska.
Okay.
So it's definitely an older model. But
Mm-hmm.
around here, and with phones nowadays, I can pretty much do any and everything I need to do on my phone, so I
Mm-hmm.
can download the maps.
Okay.
And for the most part, I have a signal. I know I can get to high ground,
Okay.
and get a cell signal if I needed to.
Okay.
But yeah, I do carry just a classic compass, good old fashioned compass, because again,
Yeah.
if the phone does go out, if you don't have a signal, and you somehow get
Yes.
twist it around while you're in the woods, being able to have those basic navigation skills, and a classic compass can always come in handy. So I always carry a
Def-
compass with me as well.
definitely.
All righty, what are we supposed to be on? We're supposed to be on tip number 3. Tip number
Yeah,
3 was practice shooting. And again, we did touch on this a little bit
we
earlier,
did. Yeah.
getting to the range. So I talked about taking your bow out. I talked about taking your muzzleloader, your rifle, and your shotgun to the range.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just to improve your confidence with that particular weapon. And again, that's really what it's all about. Try to put yourself in some different scenarios that you could encounter in a hunting scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the opportunity to practice shooting from your tree stand, by all means do that.
Mm-hmm.
Practice shooting from a kneeling position, practice shooting from a sitting position, a standing position, and even a prone position, lying down on the ground, because these are all potential scenarios you could encounter,
Yeah.
with a
Wow.
firearm,
Wow.
uh, or different scenarios with your archery equipment as well. So
Mm-hmm.
practice, practice, practice. Can't go wrong with practicing. We talked about tree stands. The next tip, is setting up your tree stands, your blinds, or your saddles.
Mm-hmm.
You also kind of touched on that. I've recently, last season was my first time really getting into saddle hunting. I tried it
Yeah.
a few times during the season.
Yeah.
Traditionally, I've been a tree stand guy.
Uh-huh.
So I have a lot of tree stands,
When you say a lot, you have more than two.
significantly more, significantly
Uh-huh.
more than 2 tree stands. Tree
Okay.
stands on multiple properties, just
Oh
spread
wow.
out. And the
Yeah.
great thing about them
Uh-huh.
is, it gives you that ability to get into the woods. You know where you're going. You know you've got to stand there. All I have to do is just put my steps on the tree, my portable steps, and I get up in my stand.
Hmm.
What I've at least tried to do in picking out my stand locations is I've tried to pick strategic locations that deer historically have used and they continue to use, just because of the environmental conditions. So you think, paralleling a river, or a
Yeah.
saddle on a ridge, or on the edge of a swamp. So I've tried to pick some strategic locations, that
I see.
they continue to be productive year over year. So that's where I try to put my
Mhm.
permanent stands.
So
Then, of
is
course, I
this
can move them if I needed to, but
okay?
for the
Because I was
most
going to
part,
ask, is this is kind of like a unspoken rule around hunters that you don't get on somebody else's tree stand?
nope, there's no unspoken rule. So again, I'm primarily talking about hunting on private property or
Mm.
leased property.
Okay.
Um, but if you're on public land
Yeah.
and someone were to climb a stand and get in a stand that you had placed and you were intending to hunt and you show up at the stand, there
Yes.
can absolutely be an issue.
Okay.
So I guess, I don't know if it's unspoken, but it would
Yeah.
be wise not to get in somebody else's stand unless you have their permission. And I'll
Right.
just leave it at that. That's
Yes.
Lucas' perspective on it. And you never know,
Mm-hmm.
but things do happen. People do crazy things.
Yeah.
Um, and especially because it's public land, you don't own it. So you show up to a spot that you scouted out, you planned and prepared to hunt, and guess what? Somebody beat you to it. There's nothing you can do. You just got to
Wow.
keep moving, keep pushing forward.
Wow.
Hopefully, you've got a backup spot or two or three,
Yeah.
set up to get into, so you can continue to hunt. And again, that's where being a mobile hunter definitely comes into play. So a
Hmm.
lot of public land hunters now are definitely taking advantage of being mobile hunters, hunting with saddles, lightweight gear, so they can
I see.
get to a spot. Hey, it's not working today. When conditions change, or somebody beat you to the spot, okay, let's
Yeah.
shift to Plan B or Plan
Hmm.
C or Plan D, and I've got all my stuff with me. I can make that move, get in the tree, and keep hunting and be able to enjoy the great outdoors.
Gotcha. And this transitions to the next thing I believe you wanted to talk about, which is
Yes.
the scent control and playing again, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Managing your scent, and playing to win. And I'll just focus more so on playing to win. Deer have a keen sense of smell. That's one of their sensories. That's how they avoid danger, stay out of trouble.
Hmm.
Primarily is with their sense of smell. Obviously, they have great eyesight as well and great
Yeah.
hearing. But the nose is really,
Ah.
what you have to be aware of. That's the biggest sensory that hunters are trying to avoid. So they've got, scent-free soaps and detergents and sprays you can use. I've used them over the years. If you want to use those things, you definitely can. But I
Hmm.
think the big takeaway here is, try to put yourself downwind of, where you anticipate seeing those animals. So you
I
don't want to
see.
kind of be in their scent cone.
Hmm.
So that's what it means when it comes to playing the wind. It's just being outside of that scent cone. And it leads us to the next one, which is, playing your entry and exit routes. So if
Ah.
you've got a designated stand that you're planning to hunt, okay, you got a location. You think it's a hot location. You know the deer using the area, but how do you get in and out of that area without alerting the deer,
Ah.
without
Yeah.
getting into the scent cone? So now
Hmm.
you can start seeing, okay, how do you piece this puzzle together?
My
And you
goodness.
can have the greatest location, but if you don't have a good entry and exit route, you'll never really be able to hunt it without busting the deer before you get in there. Yeah, you may get lucky during the rut,
Hmm.
during breeding season, but to be able to consistently get on, big mature deer, you have to put all these factors together, playing the wind, managing your scent, and having good entry and exit routes. And then, the next topic, I won't talk too much about it, but again, if you have access to a piece of private land, you're able to, plant some food plots or things
Okay.
along those lines. Definitely take advantage of it. If you have a farmer in the area who's farming the land, you could be sharing the property with a farmer. You could definitely always ask them to leave some of the crops up, pay them for it, of course. Whether it's corn or soybeans, just leave a strip or row up, just
Yeah.
to provide some additional nutrition. But, for the most part, deer eat the food that's available to them, in the woods. Next tip, staying fit.
Ah.
We
Yeah.
always include a health and wellness tip on the show. We always talk about fitness,
Right.
and it's really just applicable in every aspect of our lives. But as a hunter, you know, you definitely have to stay fit too because it can be physically demanding. You
Yes.
definitely just don't want to jump up out of your bed on opening day and try to run to the top of the ridge,
Right.
3 hours before sunrise. I mean, I can guarantee you're going to have some problems
That's
if
right.
you hadn't been preparing, to make that climb prior to when you actually need to make it. So,
Yes.
do your cardio. Definitely do some strength training. As we talked about being able to pull your bow back if you're an
Mhm.
archery hunter, you got to do some strength training. You got to work those muscles ahead of time to get them used to pulling that weight, but you also have to do it with the extra weapon too.
Mhm.
So it just makes the hunt more enjoyable. When you're healthy, you're fit, you're in shape. You're not exerting yourself. You're not working up a sweat, just walking to and from your stands to your hunting location if you're in shape. Next tip, and I know we're getting to the end here. By all means, know the regulations. Regulations change from
Yeah.
season to season or year to year.
Mhm.
Is really what I'm trying to say. Within Virginia, archery season typically started in October, but because the deer herds have been increasing over the years, and hunters just unfortunately have not been able to harvest the numbers that they needed to harvest in order to keep up with the population growth, and they've actually expanded the hunting
Oh.
season. So now we have an early archery season for antlerless only deer. So essentially, those are females.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a late antlerless only season for those, or female deer. That extends the season. So early archery season or early antlerless ocean season actually starts in September.
Yeah.
And then
Wow.
the late season goes until March. So think about that. We went from October
Yeah.
to January being their traditional season to now they've expanded it to from September
Wow.
until March just because of the population growth, of the white-tailed deer in the area and a need to harvest them.
Yeah.
So
That's an important point, right? A lot of people,
yes.
they really don't give it a lot of thought either. The
Hmm.
fact that thinning that population out is actually beneficial
Yes.
in many, many different ways. Can you walk in and talk a little bit about that, about the benefits for the deer population and also us folks who are humans?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And really it's about, the encroachment and it kind
Hmm.
of goes both ways, so as
Yeah.
areas continue to develop and grow, cities continue to expand out.
Yeah.
Obviously the developers want to be able to take advantage of that land, and a lot of times it requires them to harvest timber, clear wooded lots, and that forces the deer to have to potentially shift and other animals as well. So
Yeah.
when they potentially shift, it could cause overcrowding. And when you have overcrowding of deer, obviously it causes, so let's say if it's a farm, they're destroying the farmer's crops.
Yeah.
And then it also increases the opportunity for disease, in and amongst the animals, which could potentially spread, to hunters, get in the waterways and things like that. So it's a fine balance.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a fine balance, So we
Mm.
have regulations, we have game species for a reason. It gives hunters an opportunity to go out and enjoy the great outdoors while also doing your part from a conservation standpoint to manage the herds, to keep them in balance and keep them in check so there isn't any encroachment, animals into people's yards,
Yeah.
eating their flowers, on the roadways,
Mm.
causing accidents, so that's
Yeah.
really what it's all about. Hey, and the last tip, which is probably the most important one, and that's really all about safety. Safety, safety, safety. So
Yeah.
just stay safe. Be strategic in all things that you're doing. I talked earlier about having a first aid kit. Keep it in your backpack. Please let your family members know where you're going.
Yeah.
If you're going to be off the beaten path, give them an idea. Hey, this is kind of where I'm hunting. If you don't hear from me by then, by this particular time, we
Right.
lose communications of some sort. Then you have an idea of how to find you.
Yeah.
We talked about the tree stands. Making sure they're mounted properly in your tree. Check your straps. Check your ropes. If you're a saddle hunter, there are lots of ropes involved. Ropes can fray,
Mm.
from being rubbed back and forth on the tree bark. So it's extremely important to check your ropes throughout the season, but definitely as you transition from hunting season to hunting season. So each year, you should be checking your gear to make sure it's functioning properly so you can have a safe and enjoyable hunting season,
Yeah.
and live to be able to see that next one, and
That's right.
not suffer a fall of some sort, break your bones or do anything like that.
Right. For sure. For sure. Luther, those were some outstanding tips. A lot of them I was taking notes on, and I'll definitely have more follow-up questions for you as we continue to talk about things over the next couple of podcast episodes.
Yes, yes.
I know that you've had your winter or your fall season beard already, and I know you're ready. You're really, really itching to get out there and
Yes, I
start
am. I'm
some
excited.
hunting.
I
Oh,
am.
I
We're
know you
super
are.
excited.
I bet so. My experiences with the great outdoors are fairly recent.
Hmm.
I've been introduced to camping and RVing, and I was
Yes.
introduced to that primarily when I was in Utah, and it has become something that is really one of my passions as well. And I've grown to appreciate the great outdoors because of RVing and camping.
Mm.
Now I would say I'm kind of in the middle between just hardcore camping, and
Okay.
glamping a little bit.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
still working towards like truly being a camper, but
Okay.
I can't say that those experiences were great, and they've exposed me to a lot of wonderful things.
I'm not knocking glamping, RVing, whatever you want to call it. I really don't care.
Yeah.
I'm all about it. I have not had the opportunity to, get out there and camp via an RV.
Okay.
All of my experiences are the traditional hardcore camping,
Yeah.
sleeping in a sleeping bag on the ground, in a
Mhm.
tent. That's just what I was exposed to.
Yeah.
So that's my primary experience. But I do have a desire, to get out there. Now that I'm older, I
Right.
understand the importance of a good night's sleep,
Yes.
and I know how hard the ground can be. So RVing is on my bucket list.
All right.
I keep a bucket list.
Mm-hmm.
RVing is definitely something I want to get out there and take advantage of. We've got some great campgrounds in our area, some great scenic locations,
We
with the
do.
Blue Ridge Mountains just sitting right
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah.
And again, we have access to MWR facilities that have RVs, campers for rent.
We
Uh,
do. Yeah.
so I was just looking at some, while I was at the archery range recently, I kind of walked through and
Uh-huh.
put eyes on about 3 or 4 different models. So I actually captured some footage. So hopefully we'll get a chance to share some of that with you guys
Oh yeah.
via social media. But yeah,
Awesome.
I can get with RV camping or glamping, whatever you want to call it.
That's so cool, man. Because when I was there in Utah, I spent a couple of weeks. I wouldn't say consistently all the way through, but
Hmm.
just spread out over the years that I was there,
Mm,
camping with some good friends
yeah.
and doing some hiking and things like that. And the experience camping is, number one, you're going to be sitting around the fire. It's going to be kind of later in the evening, and everybody's telling
Mm,
all their funny stories, and you're just sharing in that moment, as
yes.
a group of people. And that was one of the biggest things, the biggest takeaways that I really, really liked about it is everybody coming together, no matter what kind of job you had, what kind of background you had.
Hmm.
There's all this commonality and camaraderie, as you sit around the campfire telling stories and everybody's laughing at your jokes because it's pretty funny and pretty wonderful time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. There's nothing like a nice fire,
Yeah, that's
some
right.
some adult spirits,
Yes,
or a non-alcoholic warm beverage on a cold night, hot cocoa, apple cider, whatever, your choosing is.
that's right.
But like you say, being amongst family and friends, and just
Sure.
connecting with nature, man, that's a great time. That
Yeah.
is a great time.
It it was something I look forward to, and something that's hard to find in the hustle and bustle of everyday life.
You're
Just that
exactly right.
peace and serenity that you can have when
Yes.
you're out there in nature.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes, sir. That's what draws me. That's one of the draws
yeah.
for me to hunting is just that peace and solidarity,
Hmm.
just reconnecting with nature. So I try to take a couple of weeks off, every year and just go spend,
Great.
about 2 solid weeks in the woods, hunting, but more importantly, just reconnecting with nature. So something I really enjoy doing. Okay, I know we've kind of talked about fall, what it means to us, but I know we're probably running a little long on this episode, so we're going to go ahead and
All right.
transition to our health and wellness segment.
All right.
And I think it's fitting, with our topic of fall.
Yeah.
And we want to talk about, maintaining your fitness activities as the seasons transition. So as summer
Right.
turns into fall, and as
Yes.
fall turns into winter, it's easy to let the colder weather sideline your fitness routine.
That's
But it's
right.
essential to stay active year
Yeah.
round, and that's what we're advocating and promoting here today. So here are some
Yes.
tips to keep moving. As the temperatures drop, first tip is to dress for success.
Right.
So as the temperatures start dropping, it's all about layering at that point. There are tons of new athletic gear,
Oh,
lightweight, energy efficient that you can wear. So just thinking about something like a light pair of gloves, a
yeah.
lightweight vest, a cap that you can put on. Once you get warmer, you can take it off and stick it in your vest pocket.
That's right.
Once you get a little bit warmer, you can open up that vest and bend it. If you need to
Hmm.
take your gloves off, you can take those off. So I think that's a crucial tip is dressing for success and dressing in layers. The second
Absolutely.
one is staying hydrated.
Yeah.
You think the winter months, fall, winter, cooler months, you don't need that hydration, but that's a myth. That's a myth.
Yeah.
Hydration is critical year round. So don't
Yeah.
let the cooler temperatures fool you into thinking you don't need to stay hydrated. Stay hydrated so you don't get dehydrated. Third tip, take advantage of that fall weather to change some of the nutrition things that you're consuming. Typically, folks consume soups and stews,
Yeah.
in the fall and winter. At least that's when I consume them. I know some folks like to eat them year round, but that's almost a symbol of fall to me as a
It
good
is.
hearty bowl of soup, or a good
Yes.
stew of some sort. So, try incorporating some of those into your diet as the season transitions. It kind of warms the heart, warms the soul.
Right.
Then the last tip is, to adapt your routine. So if you
Uh-huh.
truly can't get outdoors and do the things that you enjoy doing, try finding something that you can do alternatively indoors.
Yeah.
Great alternative things are yoga. Obviously, you've got strength training. You can do that with dumbbells, a set of
Right.
dumbbells, or with resistance bands. Doesn't take a lot. Joining a local gym.
Yes.
Those are simple things that you can do to stay active, keep moving, as the temperatures drop. And we typically tend to not want to be as active.
Yeah. That's right. That's spot on. Those are great reminders, stay active and take care of your body no matter what season. That is something that we all need to do.
Yep.
And the big plus is, like you mentioned, who doesn't love a nice warm bowl of soup after a brisk
Yes.
walk outside? It's,
Absolutely.
I mean, like you
Absolutely.
say, it does the heart well, right? And,
Yes.
I'm ready. I know you're ready. I'm ready for Auburn to do their thing this fall in football, especially the Iron Bowl when we play against Alabama. We'll talk more about that later for sure.
Yes. Roll Tide.
Yeah, War Eagle. Well, I guess I better not get myself in trouble. I suppose we should wrap up this episode
Yes. Yes.
before I
Yes.
get myself in trouble
Hey,
talking
it's all
football.
good. It's all good. All good. It's in the
Hey,
air.
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I tell you, for those listeners out there, we certainly hope that you found this discussion helpful and informative. So I challenge you all to definitely get outside and enjoy this nice fall that's coming up.
Well said, Mark. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe to the
Right.
podcast if you haven't already.
Yeah.
You can find it on all platforms that podcasts are available, such as Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and now we're also up on iHeart. So
Wow.
please subscribe. Please
Awesome.
visit our webpage
That's
at
right.
outofthewildblueyonder.com, where you can also get access to the podcast. You can learn a little bit more about Mark and myself.
Yeah.
And we also have a blog, and you can subscribe to what we're planning to do in the future with the show. Lastly, from a social media standpoint, if you're on X or Twitter, you can find us at OOTW Blue Yonder. That's OOTW Blue Yonder. And then the last plug, if you have any comments, feedback, suggestions for us, or want to be a guest on the show, send us an email at comments@outofthewildblueyonder.com.
Roger that. So until next time, stay safe and keep pushing forward.